Welcome to the Animjam Podcast. Today we got a really special guest. We're very thankful that he took some of his time out to join us, and that's Harvey Newman. How's it going, man?
It's awesome. Thanks very much for having me. I feel very honored to be here. You guys are doing what I normally do, and it feels good to be on the other side, finally answering questions and just chill back and just answer whatever you guys throw at me. It's great.
Oh, great. Yeah, we're gonna throw some curveballs there just to, just to stump you a bit.
Yeah, right at the end there's there's a speed round. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We're gonna judge you hard for that with the speed round. But let's get into it. Where, I guess, talk a little bit about yourself, like where you're from and how did you get into 3D and stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So I consider myself a citizen of the world because I'm a British citizen. I spend most of my time between London, Spain, like Madrid and Lisbon. I grew up in different places, but yeah, I've been most of my life here in the UK. So that's where I'm from, or originally. But I think that my passion for animation came from a very young age. Funny thing is, I didn't really want to be an animator to start with. I actually wanted to be an illustrator. So yeah. So my passion started with comics. So at some point, my cousin started kind of telling me about this comic situation that it was such cool ideas and stories, and you need to come with me to the comic shop and ask check some comics out and all that. Then we started reading a comic from the very beginning, just around when Image Comics was, I don't know if you guys are familiar, Image Comics, when Image Comics was founded, 1995, I think it was 1994, 1995. I think that's when a whole bunch of comics started becoming super popular, Spawn and Gen 13 and stuff.
Oh yeah.
It felt like the perfect time for me to get in because it felt nice, felt really, really exciting. So I started reading comics, and then after a certain point, I decided that I wanted to draw them. And I remember seeing this artist called Scott Campbell. Really, really interesting guy, super cool style. First guy that I saw doing American and Japanese together, anime and American comic together, the big guys, but with regular proportions, and just it looked really, really fresh. And I read his story in one Wizard magazine. It was this magazine that used to come up every month. And he just sounded like the most talented guy in the world ever. He was he made it to the comics industry when he was 20. He was found by Jim Lee, and Jim Lee was already a huge guy in the comic world. And he just started with his style, and he was just the best. So I decided at 14 years old that I'm going to be like Scott Campbell one day.
Nice.
So my goal to be at 20 years old. That's when he actually started working professionally, for me to be an illustrator. So I had about 6 years or so to actually make it happen. And
it's a good target. So yeah,
exactly.
Journey.
Exactly.
It's good to chase.
It's good to chase for sure. And it hasn't stopped though. It started at that point, but it's been that way forever. And the comic thing didn't really happen. When I was in London, I was applying to kind of lots of different places. Really nice letters coming back, but none of them kind of saying we want you. It was more good, you have talent, but we're not looking for your style just now. So I think I was really broke at that point. I was really eating cereal and milk every day. And I was it's either make it or break it at this point. And I decided to just go to university, and I'm maybe I can just have a piece of paper that tells people that I can do something. And I went to the University of West London to study specialist animation. That's what they called it, the course. And there was nothing special or animation about the course. I didn't learn animation. So I actually spent 3 years doing a degree. I had my degree in the end. I had my piece of paper, but I didn't know how to animate. So that's kind of how this came about. So but at least I got I found love for animation in those 3 years. So that's when I decided that I wanted to be an animator. I made a big mistake though, because at that point in time, I specifically, because it took me so long to learn how to illustrate, like it took me like about 6 years or so. I thought to myself, I'm going to stop illustrating and I'm going to focus myself 100% into animation. And only when I become as good as an animator as I am as an illustrator, I will continue illustrating again. And I
Yeah.
never did. I never actually
Oh,
continued illustrating.
So
You
your
gave up your first
animation,
love.
safe to say, yeah, your animation skills are far surpassed the illustration now.
I think so. At least I hope so. Yeah, no,
Wow.
but
Do you think you'll ever go back and pick up the pencil again?
I want to, man. I want to. Like I bought an iPad Pro like not long ago to actually kind of start, but I haven't so far. And between like my job as a director, between like the YouTube stuff, family, yeah, there's very little time for me to do anything else. But
Yeah.
I am very aware that if I actually kind of like take time to illustrate, it will make me a better animator. And those two things are connected. I enjoy
Yeah.
it. And if I'm any good right now, it's because of all the years that I spent illustrating, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I missed the boat, or I need to actually go back into it. I don't know. One of the
But that's
two.
crazy. Like you said, it's symbiotic, those two things. It's very and I find it's a really good story that you were aiming for something else, but then
Yeah.
you went a different path, right? But then somehow that you needed those 6 years to
Oh
sort
yeah.
of get you to like where you are, like where you are now. And you probably won't be as good of an animator if you didn't have those previous experiences, right?
No, guaranteed,
But
guaranteed.
yeah,
Like what the illustration showed me, and once again, not like you don't have to illustrate to be a good animator, right? Like everyone
Mhm.
knows this, but you need to know good form. You need to know like what it makes a good pose, all of these good things, right? But those kind of things were exactly the things that I learned, because at that point in time, the internet, computers, all of that stuff was not around so much at that
Mhm.
point, because I'm that old, was around the 90s. So I spent all of my energy after school coming home and then just like spending every waking hour just drawing, just copying things in the beginning, and then after I got better, I could actually kind of create my own. Then I started kind of creating. And my goal was like, does this look as good as this? Like as a professional, right? Like I will look at Scott Campbell's drawings or Greg Capullo, the stuff that the people that I actually admire. Like, does this look as good as this? No? Okay, I need to work some more. And then you just continue working. So because I spent so much time focusing on something for so long, that was really, really beneficial to me, because you kind
Mhm.
of learn like what it is to be resilient, and what it is to know that it pays off after a while, like no like this gratuitous, like you just see it and you get it because this is how it goes because you see it somewhere on TV, right?
Yeah.
That's the happen. You need to spend years hammering down, and even when you feel bad you need to continue hammering. So that was the first thing that I learned. And the second thing is that I was focusing so much on posture, because comics is all about just making sure that you sell the poses throughout every single like vignette, which is every single
Yeah.
square. So I was focusing so much on poses that the posing became second nature to me. So when I am an animator and I'm setting my goal poses, I'm basically seeing it like as a comic artist, right? Like, is this dynamic enough for this specific storytelling pose? If it is,
Yeah.
yes, then cool, I think it's good enough, let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, I think posing is so important. I think like my recent project that I really like focused on shapes and
Hmm.
form, like, in some movies, like maybe more realistic movies, you don't need to focus on shapes as much. But when you get to very dynamic, very cartoony sort of animation, that's
Yeah.
when you really feel like, oh man, I wish I drew, or I wish I learned more about illustration. And you know that's when I really feel like, oh man, I wish I could draw. Because my hand
Yeah.
just doesn't listen to me. It's just
No,
like there's
what
no
you're
there's no
seeing is
mind hand like
not
connection. Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's almost
yeah.
intuitive at some point. Like I feel like the drawing it trains the eye, and it was
Yeah.
good. It was really good that you had that like comparison stage as well, where you're comparing your work to, the other illustrators. You had kind of a. It's almost like when you're studying reference, you have to use a similar artistic eye to really push. Like, why does my animation not feel as real, or why doesn't it feel as good I think training the eye helps you intuitively feel something. It's hard to like even quantify, but I think it
Yeah,
helps.
no, completely. And there's something to be said as well about you just having like a pencil and a paper and not being distracted by like buttons and a computer.
Mhm.
There's something much more, I don't know, it just feels more rooted overall. Like even today, like whenever I animate, even though like as you guys know, after a while when you become a professional animator, things kind of become invisible, right? So you're just looking for where's the timeline, where's my poses, where can I move? Like it boils down to very basics, right? And that's basically what you're looking at. And there's something about just like drawing with a pencil and a paper and just going to town on that. And just like it just frees your creativity in a way that I don't know, it just feels like unique. It feels very, very cool. And all my students that I have in my workshop, I always ask them for the first week to just like don't open Maya and just kind of like do your main poses, think about stuff, look at reference, look at movies, look at film, whatever it is, just to make sure that you actually can extract as much creativity as possible, and then you can dump all that stuff into Maya the week after. I
Yeah.
think I don't know. There's something nice in that process.
Do you when you illustrate, I know you said pen and paper, do you also do it in Photoshop or like digitally or
I actually, once again, because I stopped so many years ago,
Mhm.
2003, that's when I
Yeah.
actually started university and I stopped. So I never actually got, I was too broke to get a Wacom or to have a computer even. I didn't have a computer at that point. So I
Yeah.
never got to like illustrate digitally.
Yeah.
So I do have a Wacom now. I do have a Cintiq and all that stuff. And I
Mhm.
tried my hand at it, especially with the iPads of the world now. Um, but it's something that I have to get used to. I have to
Yeah.
say, like an old
Yeah.
man situation. And I still find pen and paper feel better.
Yeah. I mean,
I have
even
to.
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I have to ask because you can illustrate and you can animate. Have you done like any sort of 2D? You put those two together?
Yes, a little bit. So I bought what's the name of this software?
TV
I
Paint?
forgot. Say again.
TV Paint?
TV Paint,
Or
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thanks. Yeah, so I bought TV Paint a few years back. I still have a license, and I tried my hand at it. First with like draw overs, and then I started actually kind of like changing my spacing and timing, and it's funny though because like you learn something and then you apply it and you have obviously you have to learn where the buttons are because the buttons are in a different place, but then when you know where the buttons are you start going like, oh, okay, so this is how I stretch my timing, and this is how I actually set my goal poses, and this is how I set
Mhm.
my spacing. um, and actually doing 2D animation for the little bit that I did, you discover the essence of animation. I feel like in
Mhm.
3D, we think about graph editor as being something, that tool that you use, and you see animation as in like timeline and graph editor. Those are the two things
Mhm.
that you see animation in. But then when you actually go into 2D and you start spacing your drawings and you start putting them together and spacing them further apart and then getting them, the moving holes to be a little bit more and less and stuff, like all of a sudden you go, this is much simpler than I thought.
Yeah.
It's difficult to execute, but the essence, the execution, like the process of animating is actually very simple, right? You do
Yeah.
one drawing and then put another drawing in front of it, and then do another drawing, and then you change the timing, and then you put another drawing, and that's
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
that's really cool. That was cool.
Yeah. Like there's something like it cuts out all the sort of all the bullshit
Yeah,
like
exactly.
from the technical stuff that
Yes.
stops you from animating. And yeah, I guess that's really like, I'm guessing that's really freeing.
Yeah,
um
it's super, super. Like, have you guys tried your hand at 2D just yet?
with
I've
the
done
bouncing
very
ball.
basic 2D. Yeah. I've done
Yeah.
2D on my phone with like stick characters and stuff.
Nice.
Just like doodling while someone, like the train or whatever, but never like a proper
Yeah.
thing.
Probably, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, well, I tried, but it didn't like come out. Like it was not great. It was not something that I would show to the world or anything. But I'll try my best. The most
You've
difficult
taken
thing.
yeah,
See it?
you've taken some experience from it. which
Yeah, I did take some experience from it. I think the most difficult thing is definitely keeping things within the same shape and holding that shape, because we are so used to 3D, we don't think about that. Like the shape is already like held for you. There's a
Yeah.
rig there, and you just move it about. And if anything, you can maybe stretch it out and deform the shape, but then you can just zero out on the channel box. That's it. Your shape is back, so you can continue
Yeah.
going on about your
Sorry,
business.
do you mean like the volume, like the mass?
The volume
Yeah.
of the
Yeah. Yeah.
exact volume of the
Yeah.
characters you're going through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a face, as you rotate the face, like the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
face. You need to
Yeah.
draw it exactly as it is, because by drawing 65, the face might be much bigger or much smaller than it was on drawing number one. That's the
Yeah.
bit that is
Yeah.
tough, and you don't even notice it. You just continue like, oh, this is looking pretty good, and then you stack them all together, and you're like, oh, turns out that is actually kind of like getting bigger over time. That was not my intention.
Yeah.
the camera's
It's a
zooming
panning.
in.
Yeah. Intentional.
Yeah.
That's cool. But like, how did you get into games then? Like, why specifically games?
Well, I was always a big fan of games, so I didn't want to, once again, it's another thing. I didn't want to get into games specifically, but thankfully, because I was born in 1980, Generation X, we're like just in between the two, where it feels like the before tech and the after tech. And I was I was always super amazed about the new consoles, like when the NES came out, or when the
Yeah.
I don't know, Sega Genesis came out, or Mega Drive. I always used to be, because I never had one as well. I used to play in my friend's house. Once again, too broke to have one, but I was always like holding the controller and be like, wow, this is really cool. And you can track here with that. That's really awesome. And then
Yeah.
the competitiveness of it all, and just like sitting on the couch and playing GoldenEye, or
Yeah.
playing Donkey Kong and having the
Yeah.
time of your life, and
Yeah.
like feeling that it's like super personal. I'm like, this is bigger than movies. This is like something that you can live. Like this
Yeah.
is personal, right? Like when you play
Yeah.
Tekken with somebody else, or Street Fighter,
Yeah.
if they beat you, it feels personal. It's like, why did you beat me? It's like, it's just
Yeah.
a game, but it's just
Yeah.
personal.
Yeah.
And
You
you,
get a rush sometimes, man. When I'm
yeah, you're
playing
correct.
like any sort of competitive game.
Yeah,
There's like a real you feel so much more connected to the
Yeah.
experience.
it's amazing.
My
It's amazing.
blood boils with Street Fighter. I just like, you just brought me back to a place where it's like I don't want to be at, man. Like I'm like, my hands are getting clammy. I'm like, yo, I need to take my joystick out right now.
That's yeah. Sweaty hands.
Yeah. But sorry, go on.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And even back then, I used to think that I think games are so universal that anyone can play them. Anyone feels the rush as well. Even people that don't know how to play, even people that are looking at you playing, like they actually feel like, it's like my fiance when she sees me playing. Like I was playing Ori in the Blind Forest, and you die a
Yeah.
lot in that game. Half
Yeah.
of the time she spends cringing in the sofa, just like, just do it. And then like I died 10 times.
Yeah.
Not even playing.
Yeah.
So that interactivity was the stuff that hooked me up. And then I saw every single generation of consoles. Like when the PS1 came out, it was amazing. Like I remember like this gray box with black discs that made these funny noises, and it was like futuristic for me at the time, because you could put discs instead of cartridges inside, and you had memory, like
The
memory,
memory
like
cards.
yeah, memory cards. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you had
Yeah.
those. This is so cool, and you can interchange them. You can put like different things in different games, and it was amazing. So all of that kind of just developed my love for games. So I knew I loved games. Then animation came along, and then I started doing animation with the intention to get into film, right? But thankfully, my mentor, the guy that actually finally taught me how to animate to this day, and I'm super thankful to this day to him, Jason Ryan, one of the founders of I Animate and director. He basically took some time, taught me how to animate for about a year and a half, and like hammered me down on like the basics and how to do things and all that. And he was the one that told me that, like, just start working in animation somewhere. Like it doesn't matter where it is, just start somewhere. That's the most important thing that you can do right now, is just start. And I had a few offers for game studios, because at that time they were taking animators that had film reels. At this point it's different, because games are so big now that you have to have a game specific reel, but at that point any film reel would be good enough to get into games. So I sent my reels into to different game studios, got a gig in games, and then I started analyzing how games work behind the scenes, and that stuff just got me hooked. Like I felt like I wanted to get into the industry. There was also like about 6 years prior to that that I was a QA tester for both Microsoft and Sega, and that what that gave me was like a preview of what it is to be a developer.
Mhm.
You as a QA, you see things from the sidelines a little bit. Unfortunately, shout out to all the QA testers out there because they do a lot of hard work. But because you're just testing the game, you're testing the final product, you don't really get a saying in the development of the game. You just test whatever the developers do, and then you
Yeah.
report back. So those 6 years made me kind of like look from the window how it is to be a developer, and just gave me like the need to actually be inside. So those two things together, Jason Ryan telling me just start, and then also seeing like development from the sides kind of like made me really want to get into development properly at that point.
Oh, that's awesome. Like he's one of the anim directors when I was at Cinesite for like a short stint. Yeah, he was
Cool.
working on like one of the films. I forgot what the film was called. I was doing another one, but he's like literally just like across the room, and
Nice.
everybody says how great of a mentor and great of a guy he is.
He was,
So
yeah, like, and super
touched a lot
humble.
of people's lives.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure, for
Yeah,
sure.
I remember watching all these anim videos when I
Yeah,
was
the
up
tutorials.
and coming. Yeah, the tutorials. They were the only things around back in the days.
yeah,
You couldn't really
Yeah,
find
exactly.
much.
Exactly.
yeah.
That's how I found him as well. Like it was even before Animate started, all the schools started. Yeah, he had a newsletters. I don't know if you guys remember. He had some newsletters like that. He had Jason Ryan, and then yeah, I just sent him a mail back. Like I think he probably saw that I was really desperate. It's like, don't worry, you got this.
But
And I
that's
just
cool
like,
that you're sending him messages and he like actually replied and took the time out to do it.
yeah, and and
That's
and that
really,
actually,
yeah.
yeah, and that actually unlocked like the stuff that I'm doing now, because Jason was the person that showed me that animators, and it's like very true from many animators that you guys probably have seen before, like the biggest mentors out there, like no matter how talented they are, like they always take time to teach others. And I think it might come from this point of view of that I had it tough, so I want you to have it a little easier than I have, because animation is so tough. But Jason was definitely one of those. And then
Yeah.
when you see talent, you kind of want to help other people, and you kind of go off and do the thing. And because he kind of like basically changed my life by teaching me how to animate. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Like I feel like I have to do that to others. I feel like it's just I have a debt to the animation
Yeah.
community because of that.
Pay it forward,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. But yeah, like what's the first game that you animated in?
The first game that I animated in was GoldenEye Reloaded. No, not Reloaded. It was it's called GoldenEye 007.
Oh,
It
shit.
was not
That
the
is
one. It was not the one originally that was for the Nintendo 64. It was basically it was the one for the Wii that came out.
okay, yeah.
That was based off the one for the N64, but it was really like had rave reviews. It was really cool, and people loved it. And you had Odd Job, and Odd Job finally was not OP anymore. So it was really cool. People loved the game. That was the first game that I animated, and yeah, just looking back, I can tell how green I was.
No, that's so cool.
That's
Wow. I
that's
was gonna
usually
say
the best
like
thing.
I was like, oh my God, you're in GoldenEye? Like you changed my life. I'm like
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you go way back if you're going
yeah.
at 64.
no.
Yeah.
Playing that. I was playing that.
Yeah. But that must be cool to work on something that's like, that's basically like a sequel to what,
Yeah.
changed your life, or was a big part of like your childhood,
Yeah, for sure. Because I remember playing the game with my friends. That couch co-op was legendary, right? Till this day, people that played it know how good it was. So we basically were recreating that game for the Wii, but for next gen. And instead of having Pierce Brosnan, was the Bond. I forgot his name. The guy that has the blue-eyed Bond that is like acting now. I forgot his name now.
Oh, David.
Oh,
Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So it was Daniel Craig. So basically, that's what we did. We actually kind of like put Daniel Craig as a main character, and it was basically Daniel Craig going through all the different stages, and it was like a really good game, fun, and had multiplayer as well for the first time. So instead of being couch co-op only, it was actually also multiplayer, so you could play it with your friends online.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
Oh
So it
man.
was actually really cool. Yeah, it was hard times though, hard work. It was super
Yeah.
hard. Like the studio had like super aggressive development time, so there was a lot of crunch on that project.
Actually, yeah, I wanted to ask you about like the gaming industry in general. Maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but like, so before, like, it feels like the standard for games is getting higher and higher, right? And the ask for games is getting higher and higher. Do you feel like the deadline or the timeline for a game is still the same though, even though there's these like increasing, I guess, demands?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I actually think that so there's two variables on this equation right here. Back in the day, there was the sense of like, I think it probably comes from film. You know how as VFX studios work, there is very much like a linear pipeline that needs to be done within a certain time. And as long as like things kind of go through the pipeline, okay, and there's one or two hiccups, things will actually match the deadline, and it's going to be nice. Games used to be developed exactly that way as well. Unfortunately, games have an engine, and the engine can be all kinds of difficult for the number of reasons, right? And the games pipeline is not like a horizontal pipeline that people just go like animation fits more or less in between, and then in the end you have VFX or sound, right? Like games is more like a circular pipeline that everyone is like feeding things to the engine all the time, right? So a number of things can go wrong. And a game, this is why games take so long, because everything needs to be built, everything needs to work in engine. You never know if things will work in engine. Coders need to code, animators need to animate, artists need to art, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of stuff that actually goes through. So what has happened over the time that I've been in the industry, 15, 16 years or so, is that people are realizing now that games take way longer and should take way longer than film or VFX, because it's not a sure science, right? There's a bunch of undetermined things that will happen over the 5, 7 years, 4 years that the game takes. So because of that, crunch is at this point is much better than before, because people have a sense that games take time. And even fans nowadays, you saw with Cyberpunk, they feel like just take your time. Like we don't care, we don't mind waiting. Like just take it, just make the game good, right?
Yeah.
So crunch still exists. It depends on where you work. Depends on the mentality of the people on top. Normally comes from the top, just like everywhere else, right? But crunch still exists, but it's very minimal, I think, at this point, because the other part of this equation is also talent. The thing that I've noticed as well is that the best talent will go first whenever you don't manage the studio well, because you have options, right? So if you actually start crunching your people and you start like mistreating them and asking them the world and just like not paying them enough or whatever reason it is, the best talent will just jump out. And the biggest studios know at this point, that's for sure, they know that they need to actually attract and keep the best talent. And for that, they need to manage those studios well and not to crunch and have a pipeline and protection and know where things are going to fall and make sure that things are as planned as possible. So that's basically the state of the industry right now.
Wow.
Yeah,
it sounds like
that's
it's
what I was
doing the right direction.
I think so. I think so. But it's still about 5 years off at this point in order to be like perfect. But it's a young industry, right? So like we are all learning. Like games has been around for, like games is like a baby in comparison to cinema, right? It's been around for like nothing. So everyone is trying to figure it out the best they can. So I don't blame anybody or any studio to actually kind of like for the crunch It's horrible. No one wants to go through it, but
Mhm.
it's like people are just trying to figure things out.
I think like that's actually specifically why I asked the question, because of Cyberpunk. There's so much, I guess, hype around the game, and
Yeah.
then when it came out, it just sort of collapsed. It sort of reminded me of like Anthem as well. Um,
Yeah.
it just felt like it never met what they promised, and it felt like people didn't want to pay for practice.
Yep.
It felt like they were releasing something that they weren't probably not confident about either.
Yeah.
And they just decided, hey, let's release this. We can fix it later in patches. And I don't
Yeah.
think any customer or any gamer wants that. They rather have something that's like solid. And
Yeah.
if it takes longer, whatever. I'd rather have that than the
Yeah.
hassle of downloading patches and patches, fixing
That's it.
like
No,
fixing
it's
all
that.
that.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I
That
get it.
first,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that first experience is so important. Like you never get that first experience again. You only get one shot in.
Exactly. And I think this is something that like games need to take from film quite a lot, right? Like
Mhm.
delay things or make sure that it's good, because once a film comes out, like very rarely you see a Zack Snyder cut again of a movie, right? Very rare. Normally the film comes out, either makes it or break or doesn't make it, and then basically that's it. And I think games is changing now, and I think Cyberpunk has been like a massive catalyst for that. But games for the last 5-10 years or so had this idea that we're going to have a zero patch, even like whenever you actually buy the game and you put the disc in or you download the game. As soon as you download the game and you press play, there's an update there for you. So that's a zero patch download, right? So after that zero patch download, the developers have a little bit more time to develop, and then the game is more or less finished. But the idea that the game is finished is never truly like true, especially with live games nowadays that need to have updates right now, right?
Mhm.
I think that, as you mentioned, like when a game comes out, it needs to be as good as possible. Anything that
Mhm.
actually comes out after needs to compound on that goodness. And games like The
Yeah.
Witcher, for example, right? They've done that really well.
Yeah.
It was a game originally, and then it just compounds on top of that stuff, right? But if a game is
Yeah.
bad, it will be bad forever, because you can only hold the attention of people for so long, especially in a game like Cyberpunk, right?
Mhm.
Because you're so looking forward to it, and because it's so much of an investment of time from a player, because you spend like hours and hours playing. It's not like 2 hours or 4 hours in a Zack Snyder cut and then it's done
Mhm.
and then you never see it again. It's like you spend like literally like weeks and weeks and weeks playing this game. So if you're gonna like invest your $60 or $70 on a game, you better get your money's worth.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, because I remember like growing up, when I played Diablo 2, for example, or like just games in general, like it was ready. It was ready. It was there. It is
Exactly.
what it is. And like, it can either be a shit game or a good game. But there wasn't this in between where it's like, oh, it could be a good game if they can fix this little problem, you know.
Exactly.
And I think that's what sort of, I guess, I don't play as much games now, but as a customer, that's what irritates me.
Yeah, for
um
sure. And I'm with
yeah.
you, man. I'm with you, and
Yeah.
I give you all the props. And once again, like me going to the developer side of things,
Mhm.
like gamers have this. The thing that I think is wrong is that gamers have a tendency to blame the developers for
Mhm.
all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But people developing the game, actually making the game, are normally never to blame. It's actually the people taking the decisions about what the developers are doing that the consumers are going to get. Those are the people that are normally in charge of taking those decisions.
Yeah.
So the fact that the developers are getting the heat, most likely what happens is that when things like that happen, the developers will know about it even before the public, and they'll be talking about it internally. Like I
Mhm.
guarantee you that in Cyberpunk, if it's anything like my experiences so far, the developers inside the studio, they're already saying to their bosses, look, the game is not in a condition to be published right now. So what are you guys
Yeah.
doing? But they
Yeah.
still go ahead because of, deadlines or money or whatever that
Yeah.
goes on.
Finances. Yeah. I think that's really similar, like really similar to film as well.
Yeah.
People blame, I think, the directors or production, but sometimes it's, kind of out of their hands. Sometimes
Right.
it's literally the client, like the head honcho who makes these makes these financial decisions.
Yeah.
It's really
The crazy thing about the crazy thing about film is that I feel like we're going the opposite direction that you guys are. Like the timelines are getting shorter, the expectations are getting higher, and like it's not really beneficial for the artists. But yeah, it's good to hear that games is actually kind of trying to reverse that trend a little.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. I thought things were getting better as well in film because I worked for a VFX studio for a short period of time, and things were very heated. That's for sure.
I think Billy has plenty of stories about the VFX pipeline.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been VFX for so long, but I mean, like, do you think that it's trending downwards slightly, or is it's gonna turn around soon?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think unless there's a fundamental change, because it sounds like in games there's a fundamental change from the top. So like the people, the companies understand that we need to give the product time. You know, we need to give artists time. And I guess now there's a lot of choices, I guess, for an artist. You know, like you're saying, like the talent would just leave. But I think with studios, I feel like the number of studios that you can go to is actually shrinking, not growing. So it's making it harder to just, jump. And these studios have been around forever, so you cannot burn any bridges, as a VFX
I heard.
artist.
And another trend that I'm seeing as well is that there's a lot of VFX and film artists that are coming to games.
Really?
And I've noticed that quite a bit. They are coming to games because I think it's because of the stability that game provides right now and the longevity, maybe. That's what I keep hearing as well. But there's a lot of people kind of like just making the jump over to games. So I think it might be because of that. Might be because things are perhaps not so well at the moment.
Well, I mean, you convinced me to turn to games right now, and I'm having a fine time in feature.
There you go. See?
I was like, oh man, like this sounds
great.
This sounds pretty exciting.
Come over, David.
But like, what are you currently working on right now? That's taking much of your time.
I'm working in this game called Everywhere. It's a company called Build a Rocket Boy, funded by Leslie Benzies. Leslie's like a guy was heavy in the making of all the GTA games, Rockstar and all that stuff. So he was one of the guys up top and all that stuff. Super secretive game, so I cannot tell you anything about anything. And same thing with the company. We want to keep like closed doors, but it's incredibly exciting. That's for sure.
Yeah,
it's really cool, and we're trying to make it as interesting as possible.
Oh wow, GTA, yeah, man, like that gets me excited.
There's a lot of talent in this company as well. Like people from all over for lots of experience as well. Like we have lots of good people.
Oh, that's cool. Like, are you all working remotely right now? I'm guessing.
At the moment, yeah. We all work remotely. The pandemic is obviously going slightly away. UK is doing quite well in terms of the pandemic, and things are starting to opening up. But I think people are still cautious, obviously, and going to an office and working. We still need to figure all that out. How does that work, and how can we return, and can we return, and are we allowed? All of that stuff, right?
Well, how are you finding it when
you?
Yeah,
I was gonna say you guys have that dual setup where you got to go in the office and you can work at home if you so choose, or is it all just from home at the moment?
At the moment, it's all home at the moment, but like I kind of foresee, I don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, but I'm guessing it's going to be like that, like most people. I don't know if it's going to be like that for everybody, but like I kind of see that most companies will actually eventually have to do that they allow kind of like people kind of to work both. I'm not too sure exactly, but fingers crossed that's going to be it, because it will allow for flexibility and for people to slowly transition to going back to the office, right? And the question as well that everyone is asking is like, does it even make sense to go back to the before times, right?
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think that having options is always the best. So I think that I think the companies that are going to come up on top on this are going to be the companies that are going to be like, we like to hire you for your talent. You tell us how you want to work. Do you want to work at home? Do you want to work in the office? Do you want to work 50-50? Let us know and we'll make it happen. I think those are the companies that are going to be like attracting the most talent going forward. And I do think that there's a lot of companies doing that out there, and people are starting to have options. And people either loved it or hated that quarantine, right? So I think all the people that loved it will probably start maybe like looking at this job situation, going to the office or whatever in a different light because of it, right?
What's your preference? Like, do you like working from home or studio?
Me,
or
I actually half and half. No, I actually would like to be like mostly in the studio. I believe. I think there's something special to be like surrounded by your coworkers and like hanging and talking about different things. And like I have like a really cool team, animation team. That's quite a lot of us. And like I started working from home and we haven't met, like we met once, like a little bit, but we haven't really worked together in the same space. And we have a bunch of fun just like doing this thing, like calls, like video calls and stuff. So I can only imagine if we actually were to work together, how much more fun it would be, right? So I think like going back to the office would be nice. But once again, like having the option to kind of like maybe hang out, it would be amazing. Because like I do have to admit that like spending time with my family, like having my family just across here whenever I want, and just like taking a 5-minute break and going and like giving a hug and come back, and it's just awesome, man. It's just really special. So that's cool.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's something to be said when you're working from home. You don't have that connection with your team as much. And it makes it a lot harder sharing ideas and sharing, like giving each other, critiques or like just, learning from each other. I think that's a big part that's like gone now because people are just like when they're working from home, they just sit in their computer. You don't really want to bother anybody and you don't want anybody to really bother you. And that feels like, it feels like either people really don't want that anymore or they really want to go back.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's like there's no, it's like black and white, right? There's no like in between. You either want it or you don't want it. And the other thing, like going back to your point about like not being like hanging out with other people. The other thing that I've noticed as well is that that feeling of like working together and always have the chance of like looking at the person next to you like computer and be like, oh, that's really cool. And then that sparks conversation and then you talk about how you got to the thing and then you come back to your desk. Same thing when you walk around, that stuff doesn't happen anymore. And it's really disorienting because you never really know exactly what other people are doing. And I only realized it because being a director, I was looking at everyone's work. And then I realized like a few weeks in that no one else was seeing everything except for me. And everyone was like, I don't know what that person is working on. I don't know. Is it cool? I don't know. And then finally we made this weekly gameplay showcase. That's what we call it. And then everyone shows everyone's work and no critiques or anything, just so everybody can see what everyone else is working. And that will get the team pumped. And people will be like, oh yeah, cool. This person, they made this cool animation. I have to up my game here, or I need to speed up, or whatever it is, right? And the sense of like being hyped by seeing other people's work, that stuff doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, so true. I had that's similar situation to what I was experiencing as well. So with my team, I would give one-on-one feedback, and then at some point I realized that the same thing, like nobody knew what everyone was doing. So I started doing dailies where I just had everybody's work in a session, and we all just go through. I give notes whilst everybody's there as well, and it's really helpful because if someone's sick and we're like, oh, we really need you to hop on this other thing that person was working on, then they already know straight away, like, yeah, I know all the notes, I know. And it's really cool too to, sometimes I drag in like new shows and stuff. I'm like, hey, check this out. And like, I can try to hype them up and show them like, this is coming down the line. It's like really cool stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I think that's super essential because team morale is definitely one of those things that takes the bigger hit with this quarantine stuff. I'm always trying to find ways to actually kind of like hype up my team by doing the things like that, like showing them something from the game, or like we have Friday night drinks every 2 weeks. So we all hang out and talk rubbish, nothing to do with work, just like have a drink and just hang out for a little bit. And that feels really good, man. Just that, you know.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I think like another thing that it feels that people are missing out from, during this quarantine period is when I first started out, I think a lot of it is making these social connections.
Mhm.
And I think a lot about this industry, it's a lot about, connections where,
Oh, for sure.
if there's another job, they'll be like, hey, like, why don't you come over?
Yeah.
And they'll give you like a word, like, maybe they'll give you a hand in getting you a position in their studio or whatnot. And what sucks is that, you miss out on all that as well. Like possibly when you're starting, like when you first start out in the industry, you're missing out on maybe getting your next job ahead of time.
That's completely
And
right.
yeah.
And this industry is so small as well, right? Because everyone knows each other. You guys know this as well. Like games is the same thing. Like if you mess up, or if you're that guy, like, and like I'll be the first one to go like, Jamie, what do you think of this person? And if Jamie goes like, no, I don't think he's the right guy. I work with them on this place, and like it happens. Like the connections happen. Like I see on ECV that he worked in the same company as you. So what do you think? And you want to be connected. You want to be the guy that actually makes an impression, and you want to be the guy that is like cool to work with and listens to feedback and all that good stuff. And I think this thing doesn't really help with that, especially if you're just getting started in the industry. And this is how you actually get into the industry, is probably much tougher for anybody.
Yeah. Like, so for like, if I was if I just graduated from school and I'm trying to get into games, right? What is your, I guess, your piece of advice for these kind of like these fresh graduates? Like, if there's one thing, if you can distill it into one or two things, that'd be great.
Oh, okay. So one thing, be passionate about games. Number one, that's it. Like that's the one thing that you need to have, because if you come into the industry with the idea that there's a lot of animators that you find that are in between. I want to go to film, but I stumbled upon games, or I'm not too sure if I want to go film or games. That stuff will probably be really bad for you, because the very first thing they will say or ask you is like, what games have you played and how do you feel about games and all that stuff. And if you more or less play and you casually play and you're like, I don't really care about games, it's going to come out that way. It's going to be like, it's all right. Right. But if you're passionate about games and you actually played, I don't know, like Uncharted or any game that you feel passionate about it, it will come out and people will see that like that spark in the eye of like, this is the best game ever, the best thing ever. That spark in the eye will actually get people hype, and that hype will actually be like, okay, so he's really into this. So yeah, and the other thing is like, you don't want to spook anybody in games, mainly because there's this sense of like, if you are in between, if you're not sure, games is incredibly hard, and it's not artistically only, but also technically, right? You have to learn all kinds of stuff about the engine, how to implement certain things, how to debug certain things, how to talk with coders and different departments, and that stuff takes time. Normally about a year or two if you come fresh from outside, but you need to be committed. You need to be committed, and you need to be there, and all that stuff, right? So like passion for games is definitely number one. And then if I could say another one, do I have another one or just have one?
Yeah, you have as many as you want, but like
so if I were to say another one, is that make you sure real specific for games, and even more specific than that, make it specific to the studio that you want to get into. So if there's a type of studio that you want to get into, Insomniac is very different from Naughty Dog, even though they do third-person animations. but one is very realistic and the other one is very cartoony and pushed animations, right? Same thing with first person and third person. If you actually want to apply to work in Modern Warfare, then you actually have to make sure that you have first person animations in your showreel and that you feel passionate about it, right? Like anything, like if you want to apply for creative assembly and working on like Total War, then it needs to actually be creature stuff, right? It's games, but it needs to be creature animations, and it needs to be creature animations catered for games. So yeah, you have to actually make your showreel specific to whatever studio you want to work in, because as the industry is growing, people now have options. Before, when I started, it was like one showreel for film could get me a job in different game studios. Great. But nowadays it's like more and more people want to work in games. Game studios have options. So I'm like, I'm just going to pick the guy that knows about games and also is passionate about games and is making the showreel that is specific to my studio. That's the guy that I'm going to pick. I'm not going to pick the generic guy that send me like a film showreel, right? So that's basically what people are actually dealing with right now.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. The landscape's definitely changed. It's a lot more competitive now, is what I noticed too. Even just the students coming out, I'm like, wow, like these guys are good.
Yeah, my showreel wouldn't make it nowadays for sure. The one that I yeah, like the students that are coming out of like everywhere, doesn't matter what school you pick, it's just the level of talent is insane. It's so good.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, we did a podcast where we revisited our show reels, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is so bad!" Like, I was like, "This is compared to like the kids nowadays, like it's not even close."
Not even close. Yeah, things have changed. Like I feel lucky. I'm like, I'm in. So it's great. If I had to reapply, I'll be screwed.
Yeah, and getting your first your first foot in the door is the hardest, right? So
it is.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thanks for watching or listening to our content. If you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again. Peace.